Do you ever think about what you're going to say to somebody the next time you see them? Do you ever practice conversations in your head before you even get there? And most of the time, the conversations never go the way that I think that they're going to go when I'm practicing them in my head. But I usually come up with 3 or 4 good lines, if I see them, and especially if they have made me angry, because I don't usually do this unless I have some kind of resentment or some need to practice what I'm going to say. And resentment is especially dangerous for me because really what it is vengeful thinking. I think about how I'm going to get back at somebody with my words. And I start thinking about how I can tear them down with the things that I say. I think about how I can get the best of them by using my smart thinking, which I don't have a lot of. I like to think that my thinking is a lot smarter than it is, and that my words will cut a lot deeper than they do. But really, I don't want to be that way to people. I just can't help it that I think like that. And maybe you even take it a step farther, and you think about slashing people's tires or pouring paint thinner on their car. That's vengeance. It doesn't always end up in violence, but just the thought of how I'm going to get back at somebody with the thing that I might say next time. That's vengeance. It's resentment. And it's poison for me. And it was poison for Saul. And in the last few, in chapter 22 onward, Saul is pretty much chasing David throughout the desert, throughout the wilderness. And David's hiding out, and he's trying to find a place to go where he can get away from Saul because he knows that Saul is trying to kill him. But really what it is Saul's just jealous of David. He knows that David is going to take over the throne of Israel, and he doesn't want to do it. And so because of his jealousy, he kind of goes crazy, and he throws stuff at Saul. And then he gets paranoid that the people around him are going to accept David as the king instead of him. So then he orders the priests to be all murdered, which he does. And he tells some of his servants, David's never going to give you what I give you. Will he give you the commands to be in charge of 1,000 people? No, David won't do that. And so Saul starts trying to secure his position, but the more that he tries to secure himself, the further out of hand that it gets. And so much so that it becomes a single-handed or a single focus for Saul to try and find David and kill him, which he cannot do. David's always a step ahead of him. David's always doing something to be out of his reach. And in fact, Saul gets so blinded by trying to find David that he gets sloppy, and he puts himself in a position several times where David could kill Saul. But David doesn't want to kill Saul. And David treats Saul like the anointed king of Israel. David treats Saul as a child of God, as a chosen one of God. David says, I cannot raise my hand against this person because he's the Lord's anointed. He knows that God will do in God's time what God wants to do with Saul, and that time is not for David to decide. And David knows that, and he follows that truth until the very end, when Saul ultimately gets himself killed. And I start thinking about that, and how does that relate to my vengeful thinking? How does that relate to my resentments? And what happens with me is that I get so single focused that I can't see anything else around me except who I want to get back at. I don't see anything else around me except what I want to do to make them suffer. I don't see anything except for how can I make this person go away. And that's all I see. And as a result of that, I lose focus of anything else in my life that I'm supposed to be doing. I'm not able to be effective as a person, as a member of society, as a leader of the people that I'm supposed to be around, as anyone that can be useful. I'm not useful to God when I'm like that. And I'd venture to say that probably nobody really is, because resentment and vengeance and fear and jealousy, all of those things keep me blocked off from God. And then I start thinking about, well, I don't have the mind to change this. I mean, I've been over this before. If I could think differently, I would. If I could just be different and not think about what I'm going to say to people the next time I see them, or how I'm going to get back at them, or what I'm going to do to make them hurt. You know, like, if I could just get over that, then I would have done it already. I would already be perfect if I could. So what do I need to do? And I start thinking about, well, David's probably a good example. You know, he waited for God to step in and take care of the problem. He was just patient. He just kept outrunning it and doing the things that he was supposed to do, because he was taking care of his business. He was going around and taking care of the battles that he could fight, and not fighting against Saul, not giving in to the temptation to retaliate. And I think about, well, what did Jesus say about it? And I remember in the Sermon on the Mount when Jesus says, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye, or a tooth for a tooth. But I say, do not resist an evildoer, because if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your coat, give them your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go also the 2nd mile." You have heard that, give to anyone that begs from you, and do not refuse anyone who wants to borrow from you. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. It's none of my business what happens to people that I'm mad at. It's none of my business the outcome. What my duty as a person who's following Jesus is to pray for the people that I would consider enemies. And I think, that's good in theory, but, how well am I really going to put that into practice? And I don't know, maybe it just starts with the thought. When I start noticing that I'm thinking about somebody and what I'm going to say to them the next time that I see them, that maybe I just say a prayer for them instead. I replace the thought with a new thought, with God's thought, and I ask for God's outcome to come for them instead of what I would have happen. Because what I would have happen would probably end up getting me killed. Maybe not physically, but definitely in my spirit. But what God would have happen is that they would know his love, and then I would be able to share that, and it starts in here. It starts with a prayer inside of me for that person, for the person who I think is persecuting me. Saul probably had the illusion that David was persecuting him, that David was after his kingdom. Saul gave it up on his own free will. Saul gave it up when he chose not to obey God. Saul gave it up when he started acting out of selfish interest rather than what was for the good of the people of God.